up, everybody? You're watching Coding with Chandler, and today I will be talking about the bad decisions that I have made as a software engineer. There were many times I felt that I was doing myself a favor by making certain decisions that were actually just harming me in the long run. And I made this video to hopefully help those who are wanting to grow in their careers or are currently struggling with imposter syndrome. A very bad decision I made very early on was trying to learn everything, or in other words, trying to learn multiple languages and frameworks at a time to essentially be more useful. When I first started in my development career, I felt that the more I knew, the more useful I was, which is a very fair assumption to make. But what I didn't understand was that the more things you take on, the less likely you are going to master a single thing. You're essentially taking on multiple things just to be mediocre at each. Unless you have 100% access to your brain, it is not easy to master multiple languages at the same time. So my tip to you is try not to stress yourself out. And you can dabble with other languages. Being a software engineer is purely working with multiple languages, so that's just the nature of your job. But mastering something comes with practice and focus, and with that, you're going to need to give each some time to learn. One of the greatest things I learned during my time as a software engineer is that no one is really expecting you to know a particular language just because it's on a project. We're simply expected to have problem-solving skills to figure it out. And there's nothing wrong with Stack Overflowing and reading documentation to figure out something that you aren't familiar with. Another common mistake is trying to stay up to date with the latest and greatest technologies simply because they're the latest and greatest technologies. This can be a big mistake because it may not be the greatest for your project. Every framework has a purpose, and if it doesn't really provide value to your project, then you're wasting useful energy trying to learn it. A mistake I was in the habit of making was comparing myself to other team members. I worked on various teams of people, and each of us came with a different set of backgrounds. And I, for some reason, expected myself to perform like them, given the background that I had. What I didn't understand was, as a coder, you're constantly learning. The senior software engineers I worked with were constantly learning, and maybe even had imposter syndrome, just in a way that was apart from mine, and I simply thought they knew everything. And not any software engineer knows everything. Everyone learns at their own pace and has their own set of skills to develop. So go easy on yourself. In the coding world, you've got self-taught engineers, coding bootcamp grads, computer science graduates, and people who eat, breathe, and sleep code their entire lives. We perform the way we perform, but what we all have in common is that we're all constantly learning. And it never stopped. A really bad mistake that I was in the habit of making, especially at my first position, was overworking myself to provide value. I had a tendency to do more than what was asked to get positive feedback and feel like a team player. Let me tell you a little secret. If you need to do things that are outside of the job description to simply hear a good job, then you're working for the wrong company. I felt obligated to work overtime each day over work that could have gotten done the next morning. And guess what? I didn't even get the feedback I was striving for. All it really did was, 1, set the expectation that I will work past 5, and 2, bring me farther from this idea of work-life balance. You shouldn't feel obligated to work outside of work to provide value. I had a tendency to buy crash courses or books to read over the weekend to hopefully provide value at work. And there's nothing wrong with this if this is something that you truly want to do. But there is a clear difference between wanting to do something and feeling required to do something. Ever heard the saying, you'll learn on the job? Learn on the job, because you need work-life balance and a clear head to perform well at work. Now, what I'm not saying is don't develop your skills outside of work. That's not at all what my message is. That's something that I personally do on a regular basis, but that's my own personal choice, not something that I feel pressured to do. And the same applies to you. A huge mistake I've made in the past is not being 100% honest with my manager. During my experience as a software engineer, I've always had weekly one-on-ones with my manager where I talk about my career goals, how I'm progressing, and simply how I'm feeling. Very early on in my career at my first job, I was really in a bad place when it came to imposter syndrome, and I also worked with a toxic colleague. Working alongside someone who didn't have the best intentions led me to leaving the company instead of simply being honest with my manager about what was bothering me. Now, there was tons of projects happening at the company, and there was a variety of teams. It was a pretty huge company. I'm sure I could have been easily moved to a different project had I spoken up, and that would have mitigated a lot of stress. But instead, I chose moving on to a different company as a solution, which of course ended up being a great decision in the long run, but just not for the right reasons. One-on-one meetings with your manager or team lead is simply an opportunity to talk about your goals, how you're performing, and yes, how you're feeling. Are you feeling overwhelmed? Is something bothering you? All of these questions can be discussed in your one-on-ones, and I simply didn't take advantage of that. At the time, I thought that because I was the youngest software engineer on the team, that the problems I had would be immature to bring up. But it led to a lot of stress and anxiety in the long run, and it all could have been avoided. So if you're struggling with imposter syndrome, or maybe something in the workplace is bothering you, nothing is stopping you from bringing that up. And it's best to do that before an even bigger problem arises out of that. A bad decision that I've made, and one that's extremely common, is avoiding speaking up in meetings. We've all been there where you're in a room full of people that you feel are more qualified than you, so you just let them take the wheel. I religiously had this problem. I not only felt that my team could drive certain decisions that I couldn't, but that my ideas would be shot down. And after getting out of this habit, I realized that it is simply not true. You never know the value your ideas will bring to the team unless you put them out there. And there were many times where I thought that what I had to say was either obvious, already thought of, or maybe even valueless. But because I spoke up, it sparked a conversation that led to some really good decisions being made. So even if what you say isn't necessarily the best idea, you never know what type of conversation it'll spark up to lead the team in the right direction. Not speaking up can also make it appear as if you simply don't care. Don't let imposter syndrome allow you to make this mistake, because you will be stuck with it if you keep letting it drive your decisions. I also had this fear of asking questions because I was afraid it made me look uneducated. This simply isn't true. Questions bring you closer to the answers. You were stuck on a problem, you've done some Stack Overflowing, and you've done some research for hours, and yet you have this team of, like, I don't know, 6 software engineers. Those are your resources. And there will be times where they might have the same question, or maybe they already had it and it was already answered. Asking can bring clarity to yourself and others and save you a lot of time. Try not to be the person that stays quiet out of fear, because that was me and it held me back in so many ways. I know it's easy to let imposter syndrome drive you down, but letting it drive your decisions will do exactly just that. If you're feeling stuck or you're not sure how to move in the right direction, I am totally happy to help. I provide 45-minute mentorship sessions, so feel free to send an email to chandler@codably.com and we'll get something scheduled. To show your support, feel free to hit the like button, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and share the video with a friend. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful for anybody who is dealing with imposter syndrome or is simply feeling stuck in their growth as a software engineer. I think we've all been there. I hope this was helpful. I'll see you guys soon.